This step is optional, but if you have access to the most recent version of Adobe Camera Raw found in Adobe Bridge, you can use AI to upscale your artwork. If you're interested in a tutorial about upscaling your artwork this way, have a look at my reference video on YouTube. I'll only briefly demonstrate the process in this course. There are two downsides to this. The first is that you will have to discard all of your layers, so you will want to process a copy of your painting saved as a TIFF, and then place it into your Corel Painter composition if you wish to continue editing it after enlarging. The second is that enlarging your image will make the file size larger, thus making performance slower in Corel Painter. This shouldn't be as much of a concern at this point, since the bulk of the painting with larger brushes has been completed. After applying super resolution, I have doubled the resolution or pixel density of my image. At 100% zoom, I can see some artifacts that sort of look like a canvas texture. In this case, I think it helps convey the frosty look, but it might not work for everything. The point of enlarging isn't to use the image at 100% anyway. If you zoom out a bit, you don't see the artifacts as much. So as the name of the filter implies, this is for adding resolution. It's not changing the dimensions of your canvas. In layman's terms, if I print this at the intended size, 18 by 24 inches, the image will look much crisper. If I tried to print the image at the original low resolution, it would be a bit blurry. Though the results are not perfect, this works pretty well to enlarge your artwork. Alternatively, if you own Rebel 5 Pro, you can use the new nanopixel feature to upscale your artwork up to 4 times larger. This method isn't perfect either, but it might give you a better result depending on the painting. After enlarging, you may want to save as a TIFF or PSD. Then open it in Painter, and paint over or blend any artifacts you aren't happy with. If you like, you can add finer details to your painting as well. I'll open the enlarged version of the painting, and make a note of the pixel dimensions. It's 3,456 pixels wide. Next, I'll select all, and copy the upscaled painting. Then I'll go to my layered composition, and resize it to match the dimensions of the upscaled artwork. In this case, it's 3,456 pixels wide. This will enlarge all of the layers. I'll group all of the original layers. I can create selections of these layers at any time to continue using these boundaries with the merged layers. This will work as long as I don't change the shape of the merged layers so that they become misaligned from the individual layers. Next, I'll paste the upscaled artwork at the top of the layer order. You will need to center this image using the Layer Adjuster tool. You can make that task easier by setting the merged layer to Difference. This will show you how misaligned the two images are. Use the arrow keys to nudge it into place. Then change it back to a default layer. You might not be able to get it exactly aligned, but get it as close as possible. I'll name this layer Merged, and now I can work on this layer and add layers above it to continue adding detail to finish up the painting. For now, I will just save a copy of this painting as a RIF and make a note in the file name that this is the merged version. Before we add any detail, let's try one more optional technique that may be useful for improving your work. You can use artificial intelligence to analyze your artwork and give you suggestions about how to make it look more detailed. Photoshop's Landscape Mixer Neural Filter is one such example. You'll need to work with a flattened copy of your work. I'll just use the enhanced TIFF file I upscaled earlier. I'll add 1% winter and slowly increase it. You can see that the AI reinterprets the image and tries to suggest additional detail based on the input from the sliders. Winter is adding snow and other imagery you would expect to see in a winter landscape, but it's also expecting there to be mountains rather than trees in the distance, so it's rendering the image incorrectly in that area. Everything else looks fantastic. I can really see how much more detail I could add to the grass, trees, and stream. I'll remove winter, and let's preview spring and summer. They don't seem to clear up the snow, so in a sense, they're just presenting us with alternate versions of our landscape. You can see that they do add a lot of unique detail to the tree trunks, for example. In order to fully change the season, you must first mix your landscape with another type of landscape that has some green foliage in it. I'll choose the one with the river. Now I can see what it might look like if the snow were melted. I could even paint this, and then blend the two paintings together using a mask and a linear gradient. I'll return to the Landscape Mixer. If these options don't cut it, you can upload your own image as well. To reset the filter, you can click in the top right. The second image option gives me a slightly different take on my painting as well. Lowering the strength will help to randomize the details and keep some of your original image. I can even add more or less of the sunset effect to change the lighting. You may be inspired by this image to add more to your painting. Feel free to repeat this process of evaluating your work with AI and adding more detail several times until you're satisfied with your painting. Just keep in mind that sometimes the AI misinterprets the image and adds incorrect or unpleasant details. Feel free to omit those by using the Subtract Selection button and painting over the area you do not want to keep. When you apply the filter, you'll get only the areas you like as a separate layer. You can then save this as a new enhanced reference image to continue working on your painting. And remember, I started with a painting and then turned that into a reference image, not the other way around. That's pretty revolutionary for landscape painting, and I think it will become more commonplace as artists warm up to the creative benefits of AI. For a tutorial on how to use Photoshop's Landscape Mixer, watch my reference video. I'm happy with how my painting looks, so I don't need to take any of these suggestions, but it's nice to see how the painting could look without having to paint it myself. Near the end of the painting is when I prefer to merge layers together and then blend them. If your layers overlap a lot, you can merge and blend a few layers at a time, or you can merge everything at once and then blend. If you didn't follow the optional steps for flattening and enlarging your work, you can click on the topmost layer, select all, then choose Copy Merged, and then Paste in Place. This will merge a copy of all of your layers while retaining the individual layers. The advantage to keeping your layers despite merging them is that you can still select specific areas of the painting, even though it has been flattened. It's okay that these layers are covered up because all we want are the outlines of the layers, which can be enabled with Select Layer Content. On the merged layer, let's use the Blur blender to soften the horizon. To keep the blender from touching the foreground, just make a selection of the group or layers that you want to exclude, and then invert it. Next, lightly blur the distant trees to set them back. Do this for the midground as well. Apply less blur than you did in the background. Deselect the selection when you are through with it. The foreground may require some blending, but should remain sharp overall. Of course, you can soften anything that is too sharp, like the foreground twigs, for instance. You can also blur the grass at the very bottom of the canvas, because that can be out of focus too. It wouldn't hurt to lightly blur the tree canopies a bit too. It might help to remove some of that canvas texture if you enlarged your painting. Next, I'll use the Diffuse Blur blender to blend horizontally with light pressure where the distant snow meets the grass. I'll also do this at the bottom of any lower right grass that has a harsh bottom edge. The Smooth Knife blender can also work well to blend areas together and soften transitions. And let's add a bit more mist on a new screen layer right along the horizon using the digital airbrush. Just keep it off the trees in the foreground. If there is anything else you want to add, now is the time to do it. If you upscaled your artwork, you may want to go with the flow and just set your paper texture to a canvas like small dots or fine dots and adjust the scale until it matches the pattern created by the upscaling artifacts. You can use layers to experiment all you like. After blending, you may need to sharpen some areas as well. I can use the Greasy blender for that. As we near the end of this painting, I recommend saving your progress and then take a break. Look back at the painting periodically and make a note of anything you'd like to change. It's that break that really helps you focus on areas you may have overlooked. We all make mistakes. Fortunately, it is relatively easy to fix most anything, especially since you still have all of your layers and iterative saves. Maybe you need to correct the color of a layer or area. Just make a selection of those layers and paint on a new layer. I'll use the digital airbrush on an overlay layer to saturate the grass a bit more. Just be sure it doesn't go outside of your gamut mask. If the selection trick does not work, you may have to go into an older save and copy layers from it. Or maybe the other way around works better. You can paste newer layers into your older composition. Or worst case scenario, you may have to go back a bit and continue from an older save. There are so many ways to get out of mistakes. You can flip your canvas horizontally to look for any final mistakes. And view your artwork in grayscale. Keep an eye out for areas that feel too light or too dark and adjust them. I'm using color dodge and color burn layers for this. I'll blend by reducing the opacity of the layers. I think I'm happy with my painting, so let's move on to the next step, which is adding some effects to bring the colors together. The finishing touches are some color effects we will add over the entire painting. I save these for last because they can interfere with color sampling since they tint underlying colors. If you need to add to your painting after this point, be sure to hide these layers temporarily. Let's create two overlay layers called Overlay Warm and Overlay Cool. And we'll use the digital airbrush with an indigo on the cool layer to fill the entire canvas. You can hunt for the color you want. I'll choose a mid-tone. Next, I'll add a mask to that layer and use the digital airbrush with black to mask away some of the cool areas. I only want the background, the bottom of the foreground, and the left sides of all of the objects to be cool. On the warm layer, I'll fill with a warm color and mask some of that away in the cool areas. When you are through, reduce the opacity of the overlay layers to blend them in. Don't use so much that it starts to take the colors far out of gamut. You can verify by sampling colors and comparing them to your gamut mask limits. Group these layers together, and you can hide and show them to judge their effect. At this point, I'm happy with how my painting looks, so I think I'll call this a finished painting. You can create a new layer and sign your work if you like. As I mentioned in the beginning of this course, you can print this if you are so inclined. If you're printing on a wrapped canvas or adding a mat, you'll want to put your signature inset a bit from the edges so it does not get cut off. I'll save the primary copy of my work with all of my layers as a RIF, then I'll save a copy as any other formats I might want to use for printing or posting to the web. For example, I can choose TIFF or JPEG for printing depending on what your printer requires. You should be able to get an okay 24x18 print from this, but a smaller print size would give you sharper details. You can also resize your artwork to make it smaller so you can post it on the web. The PNG or JPEG formats work well for this. If you like, you can even share your work with me and I will post it in the student gallery for this course. That brings us to the end of this course. Hopefully you've completed a wonderful new painting and you've learned a lot of great techniques that you can apply to future paintings. If you enjoyed this course, give it a rating, and if you want to learn more landscape painting techniques or even just how to use Corel Painter in general, check out my other courses and tutorials on my website at aaronrutten.com. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next course.